Welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have you here today. As usual, we'll ask people to put their names in the chat and where they're from. I see some, I'll call them repeaters, people that have been here multiple times. So happy to see you again. I see David Yates. He's somebody I recognize that's been here before. Of course, Tom, and looking for other people, a couple people from our university that are here often. So thank you for joining us again. We're really excited about today for a whole host of reasons. So I'll start with one of them. On Friday, Goodwin University will have its third annual UDL conference. This is a very boutique small conference. Tom, you were there in the beginning, and then COVID hit, and we kind of couldn't quite get it back together, but thanks to Carrie and other people who happen to be on this Zoom, the conference is running. So we're really excited about that. The other thing, and I'll go ahead and I'm going to start to share the slides. So please continue to put your names in the chat. Sarah Silverman is playing I don't know, helper today, because Rob and I are the presenters, and she's putting some links in the chat. She also put a copy of the slides in the chat. I hope you find the slides helpful. The links also carry information about the 9 and 9 Padlet, YouTube, where you can get the recordings, and so on and so forth. Really important, and in the last link that's in that chat is the most recent Goodwin Universal Design for Learning blog post. We're super excited about that post. It marks the 25th anniversary of Goodwin University and also brings to the fore our, I'll say, unwavering dedication to equity for our students, and to really gets at the essence of what we do at Goodwin with regard to UDL. So we're very excited about that. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead, I'm like reading who's in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, hopefully, and go ahead and put it in presentation mode. And again, this is the last of the 9 and 9 webinar series about UDL, and we've been very fortunate to have amazing participation from literally all over the world. And it's sponsored by the Goodwin University Institute for Learning Innovation and Goodwin's Center for Teaching Excellence and the University of Bridgeport Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching. For those that do not know, Goodwin and the University of Bridgeport are connected at the enterprise level. We're what I would call cousin universities. You know, we can't say brother or sister, but we're more like cousins. And so we do many things jointly whenever we can. And it's really been a great partnership, especially with our friend Stephanie, who is here today and who runs that center. So we're glad to have her. We are diverging, not going to do what we said we were going to do. We are, because UDL 3.0 is out, we're going to just start with that. And I want to make sure that people understand the way this is set up today. We really want your collective expertise. So there'll be lots of stop and shares and thanks, or whichever order that should have gone in. And then importantly, we're going to talk about a little bit about UDL writ large, more generally, in case there are people with us today who maybe don't have all the good latest news on UDL 3.0. So we're very excited to do that. And for those, I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Diana Larocco, and I am the Associate Provost for Learning and Teaching at Goodwin University. I'm also the Dean of the School of Applied Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, and I direct our center where UDL is our special expertise. We have Rob. Do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Rob Legary. I'm the MED Program Director, which is a master's program in education, teacher leadership, both here at Goodwin University and University of Bridgeport. It's grounded in UDL. So we're modeling UDL principles and guidelines and teaching many teachers how to implement UDL in their classroom spaces. I also co-facilitate the UDL Institute with Diana and also with Ann Jeanette, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, great. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to let Rob take it away. I'm going to mute my mic unless I unmute to say to Rob, let's move it on to the next. Let me just say that. So Rob and I work together frequently, so you'll watch us play off of each other a little bit and have some fun. So again, continue to put your information in the chat and welcome. And I'm going to mute and go to the next slide.
Yep. So, as all of you know, we're passionate about UDL and designing transparent teaching and learning experiences. And a lot of what you'll see today throughout the webinar is not anything that we've come up with or anything new. So when you reflect on Mark Twain's quote there, we're pulling from a lot of different sources and adapting and modifying, especially from the CAST website. So we're not taking credit for any original ideas, but maybe just putting it together in a different way for all of you to be able to engage in the material today. Next. Good. So here's our ambitious agenda. So we do have 4 opportunities where we'll be asking you stop and reflect, where you can share out in the chat as well as unmute, and you can share out through audio. And really, as Diana said, we want to really acknowledge and be inclusive of anybody who's new to UDL. And I think we're all sort of new to the 3.0 framework today. So we'll do an overview of that framework, and then we'll go into action expression and look at designing options for interaction, which is really the guideline that we're tasked with today. And we'll keep things moving and make sure that you all can engage in what we're offering here. Next. So to contextualize today's learning, again, is really, as we progress through the webinar, we want to make sure we ask you to reflect on and make connections between the different concepts that we're presenting, and really have you share out what you know and what you do in your own practice and personal experiences. And again, for those who are newer to UDL, feel free to pose any questions or comments. We have a wonderful sort of group of experts here and practitioners on this webinar who can also answer in chat, and we'll keep an eye on those responses in chat. Next. So here's the new 3.0 UDL framework. And what I'll do is kind of walk us through, again, considering we may have new folks here to UDL, and kind of take you through each of the different areas here and keep it moving. Really, to start with the goal of UDL, and especially with this iteration of the framework, the goal is really learner agency. And this is something that we'll be talking about throughout the webinar today. And you have opportunities to reflect on what you're doing to support and promote learner agency. But the goal is really is learner agency that is purposeful and reflective, which addresses the engagement principle, resourceful and authentic, which addresses the representation principle, and strategic and action-oriented, which addresses the action and expression principle, which we'll be talking about today. When you look at the guidelines vertically, you can see they're organized with each of the 3 principles. We have 35, of course, we have 9 guidelines and 35 associated considerations, which were formerly known as checkpoints. They are still using the numbers here for the considerations. And then when you look horizontally, starting with access, you can see it moves us across. So it really takes a look at ways we increase access to the learning goal by designing options for welcoming interests, for perception, and also for interaction, which is the guideline we're focusing on today. The second sort of band, horizontal band, is looking at support. So really looking at how these guidelines really suggest ways to support the learning process by designing options for effort and persistence, language and symbols, and expression and communication. And finally, what's different about the 3.0 UDL guidelines is that the executive function row that you see there used to reside in the lower right-hand corner of action and expression. Now it pervades the framework. So you see executive functioning as it relates to emotional capacity, building knowledge, and then strategy development. Next. And here we are with our 4 big ideas for UDL. And this is, again, for anyone who's new to UDL, or this may be a great review for the more seasoned UDL practitioners. So the 4 big ideas that you see here are expert learner variability, design for learning, establish alignment, and remove design barriers. I'll just say a quick thing about each of them. Learner variability is really why we embrace UDL and why we practice UDL. It anticipates learner variability. We see it as a strength, and we also are designing for variability in mind. The second big idea is designing for learning. And it's really looking at how we are sort of building in multiple options where we're removing barriers, and any barrier could be a place where our learners are asking questions, or they're getting stuck, or we have to reteach and re-explain anything. So it really is a way in how we look at learning experiences and how we remove those different design barriers. And when we look at establishing alignment, we're looking at learning goals, as well as learning assessments and teaching and learning methods and resources. So making sure all 4 of those curricular components are coherent and really sort of speak to one another when we're coming up with instructional design. And then something I kind of skipped over was, and kind of moved into remove design barriers, but designing for learning is really looking at how we can look at how the details can create sometimes disproportionate or unintentional outcomes. So that image that you see there is a staircase that sort of leads to nowhere. And I think in many cases, when we look at our courses or our learning and teaching practices, however unintentional, we'll create some of these design barriers and then reflect on what we did. And then that cartoon that really speaks to removing design barriers is looking at how we can really separate the modality for expression when it comes to, say, assignments or assessments from the learning goal itself. So in other words, we want to focus on the learning goal, climbing the tree to the top, and not really get caught up on the actual method or modality. So our goal for 3.0 UDL is looking at learner agency. So how can we design experiences that develop learners' capacity to actively participate in their learning process? And really, we want learners to be part of their learning and be part of that learning journey and not separated or apart from it. So that's our focus for today, looking at learner agency. And that takes us to our first stop and reflect and share. So you can do this individually. And again, as a reminder, we encourage you to share out in the chat, or you can unmute and share out verbally. So focusing on learner agency and what you do to facilitate learner agency, we're asking, how do your current practices facilitate or potentially hinder learners' ability to own their own learning process? So again, feel free to share in chat. We'll keep track of it. Diana will keep track of it, as well as Sarah. And if you do want to share out, just unmute yourself and you can share out verbally. But again, how do your current practices facilitate or potentially hinder learners' ability to own their learning process?
And any examples that people want to offer, if a website, where, as those of you that have been in these webinars before know that people share all kinds of information. We've had some wonderful collegial collaboration around resources. So again, if you want to unmute and just share, otherwise we would love for you to put something in the chat. And University of Vermont, you're having a party. So that is so cool. They're doing a watch party. So Carrie, we'll have to think about this for the next time. So Sarah Silverman wrote, I give a very choose your own adventure final project option. Cool. Christopher wrote, ongoing places in which learners can actively reflect on learning processes in whatever way they can express that best. Way to go, Chris. Through prompts that relate to the learning outcomes. And writing good prompts is That's a gift. Tracy said, I went from teaching middle school to the disability office in higher education. You go, Tracy. And I still need to find the balance between holding hands and allowing autonomy, yeah, and self-determination, which is so critical. Sylvia said, I explained the goal is to address the learning objectives, and I encourage learners to find the screen is moving. Find the modality that works best for them, assign text, recorded lectures, or external resources. Thank you, Sylvia. So, so important. Ellen said, in several classes, she gives students the opportunities to choose what they want to research and present on. I encourage them to find something related to the course, but not explicitly covered in the course materials. Susan Harrington, in small first year seminars this semester, I'm doing a weekly check in post at the end of the last class of the week. I asked students to at least post an emoji. What a good idea. About how they feel about their learning that week, and then they can comment in a more structured way, if applicable, helps them reflect and manage tasks. And Ellen wrote, yeah, sometimes the choices hinder, and we're going to talk about that, Ellen. So thanks for bringing that up. Suna, if I said that right, weekly self-assessment about their online participation allows students to have responsibility for their own learning progress. This whole self-assessment thing is critical. Sarah said, I give a very we had the choose your own adventure. And then Julia said she finds this too, that she has to scaffold students. Okay, so that was a response to Sarah. And then Catherine said, not so much for my teaching context. She tends to have smaller classes, but went on to say, I think learners' choices can be more difficult in high enrollment courses. Oh, you know that. And Tom, as always, wonderful. Tom said, I try to give learners tools and spaces that where they have control and then teach them how to use the tools. That is so critical. Thank you, Tom. And he put a link in there to an article, or is it a book, Tom? A book? A book?
Yep, chapter in Transforming Higher Ed Through UDL, an International Perspective by our friends Sean Bracken and Katie Novak as the editors.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then Ellen said she has students submit assignments in multiple formats. And, several of those assignments. And then David says he tries to provide multiple options for all assignments using data gathered in questionnaires to tailor options to student bioinformation. That's so critical for building rapport. Yeah, really essential. Thank you. Okay, Rob, you ready?
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for sharing out. So I think as we see here on this slide, looking at characteristics of agentic learners, we covered a lot of those areas, looking at self-directed learning, pursuing their own learning goals. And I think what I heard too, Diana, especially with the self-assessment piece, was kind of this focus on reflexivity. So teaching students how to examine their learning experiences, thought processes, assumptions, and really thinking more about how they're learning. So I think that's a big part of this, where learners are taking control of their learning and becoming part of that process. Good. So the next slide, I think, really captures this. And there's a free, I think this book is free, right, Diana, where they can download it, by James Anderson. But it's looking at the design elements that promote learner agency. And you can see here with these different circles, we have environment to act, will to act, and power to act, which really intersect and lead to this sort of concept of learner agency. The first one, environment to act, is how do we design learning contexts that are free of restraints and really offer challenges for students beyond their current abilities and really get them to stretch into their own learning. And again, looking at how we facilitate that environment to remove those barriers, but also to challenge our students. The next one, will to act, is really, I think, of self-efficacy, really getting students, where we are designing learning experiences to really support for our students a growth mindset where they can really shape and control their circumstances, and more importantly, really develop their talents and abilities and intelligence. So again, putting them in that sort of driver's seat. And then finally, the power to act is where we can also design learning experiences that support the development of students' learning skills really allow them to engage independently in their learning process and really be able to raise their own performance by assessing their performance and meeting new challenges. So that's a wonderful sort of infographic that helps to conceptualize learner agency. Diana, keeping me on target here. So the next sort of slide here really dives into our learners, where how do they show what they know? So that's the design for multiple means of action and expression. And this is really the strategic network, or the how of learning, as you can see there, sort of located in our frontal brain. And this is where we're planning and executing and monitoring tasks. We're coordinating different mental processes, motor actions, and skills. And again, seasoned practitioners, you know this. Those are newer to UDL. This is again where learners are showing us what they're learning, and it's really essential for everyday activities. Everything from putting together this presentation to driving a car. Next slide. And this is where we are. So you can see we're focused on design options for interaction, and we're looking at those two considerations, and we're going to dive deeper into each of these considerations. And again, this guideline is really looking at the different options that we're designing for physical interaction with materials, resources, tools, and environments for our learners. So here's the next stop and reflect, and we're looking at the first of two considerations, 4.1 here, vary and honor the methods for response, navigation, and movement. And what we're going to ask you to do is really, again, think about your own experiences, both in a teaching role and also personally, and what have you done to vary and honor the response, navigation, and movement methods? So we're looking at the flexibility that we design and how our learners interact with the learning environment, also with the learning materials that we may be providing, and the different activities. So what are those things that you've done to vary and honor the response and navigation and movement methods? So please feel free to share out, as Diana said, any resources or examples, and really this will get our conversation going as we talk more about this consideration.
And again, we really believe that the collective knowledge in this Zoom room is really important. So please contribute. And Rob, just giving you a time check, we're doing perfectly wonderful for time. So there's plenty of opportunities if people would prefer to speak rather than type. We want to make sure everybody's heard. So Tom says, varying response methods can be as simple as saying out loud at the beginning of a session that there are many ways to be in the session. This is true, such as lurking. Oh my God, Tom, you make me laugh. Oh my God. Lurking, personal note taking, chat, or verbal engagement. Absolutely.
That's
And
great.
when we run institutes, and we often do it here, we didn't today, but thanks for that reminder, Tom. We tell people be who and how you need to be. We encourage you to stand up if you need to stand up, to have a beverage, take a snack, if you need to step away. We're very, very much, people have to be who they are. Susan, you wrote, in terms of navigation, I like to take class time to have students doing tasks in the LMS, in the learning management system, so I can see how they navigate and hear their frustrations. And then I can remedy where I need to and reteach where I need to. And I know there's somebody in this space right now. And Jeanette, do you want to unmute and just for a second and say because you met with a student, was it yesterday or the day before?
Yes.
Yeah, and had similar kinds of experience. So do you want to just share that out loud?
Sure. I just met with a student who was, really confused on how to use the technology. So I showed her various ways to submit assignments and find her material, and told her too that if you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out now that I have a good understanding of what she was looking at.
Yeah, so that's so important, this idea of understanding the technology, perhaps limitations and experience, whatever it is. So Christopher wrote, my colleague Kara Loft here at the University of, oh my God, I don't want to say it.
Guelph.
Yeah.
Thank you. Focuses on indigenous rooted approach of circle pedagogy, something to consider here. Wow, thank you for that. Everybody should be able to download the chat if they want to. Other thoughts on this one? So really this idea of, and the word honor, Christopher, you bring that up with this particular contribution to our collective understanding. Because it's really honoring what people need and how they're going to come into the learning situation, and then how they need to, again, because that's what this is about, design options for interaction, how they need to engage, and even how they need to exit the situation at any given time. So thank you for that. Okay, and then Catherine wrote, what about distraction? Are there ways that you can support students who are easily distracted in an in-person learning environment? I'd love to see if people, I have an idea that my colleague Lisa Zilowinski, who presented, was it one time ago or 2 times ago, offered that she does in her classes. But let's see if anybody else has something to offer here. Yeah, and I actually can offer a lot because I am easily distracted myself. And I'm sure other people. Okay, and Tom says he's commenting on the link that Christopher shared, so thank you. All right, so let me tell you what my colleague did. Catherine said she's easily distracted. So things you can do in a face-to-face on-campus type of class is buy yourself a bunch of fiddlies, right? Things that people can play with. I did this for the doctoral students when I taught at the University of Hartford. I would bring a bag in to class and use and share them with students. My colleague, Lisa Zilowinski, she offered to have students put in their earbuds if it would help, that they would be less distracted, depending on what the activity in the class was. And again, allowing students to get up, to move around, to stand, to sit on the floor. And then what's always helpful, depending on your space and the number of students, of course, is making sure students get water and whatever they might need. So allowing them to bring snacks and beverages to class are things that I know that worked in the doctoral program where students were taking 2 classes a night and it was a very long night. So, all right. And then Tom is sharing other resources here in the chat. Anybody else have thoughts on this one? The distraction. All right. Rob?
Good. Yeah, I think we covered a lot of those areas there. And
here we go. Wait, there's one more.
There's one
Talking
more.
about classroom norms. Yes, norm.
Yeah.
You can. Yeah. So, do we allow food? Do we not allow food? Do we allow students to stand? Do we allow students to have on headsets? Yeah. What to do if you are distracted? Yeah. Thanks.
And we kind of, in the synchronous online, we kind of put that out there right in the beginning where they can take breaks, they can eat, they can do whatever, and we won't interpret it as them not paying attention. That's a great way. Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
So the second consideration here under the interaction guideline is looking at optimizing different ways to access learning materials. So really ensuring that the materials and technologies that we're using, either low technology, medium, or high, are compatible, with any assistive devices and accessible to all learners. So we were, right, Diana, we had a faculty session about accessibility, looking at the LMS in particular. So that's where I sort of go when I'm thinking of this. But we're interested in seeing what you have done to optimize. And there's that word optimize access to accessible materials and assistive technologies and tools in your learning spaces, both online, in person, synchronous or asynchronous. So again, feel free either to share out in the chat any examples or links, or you can unmute and share out verbally.
And Rob, I don't know if we jumped ahead on this one, but if there was anything you wanted to offer on the previous one while people are thinking, or we can wait.
Yeah, I think the previous one, and Anjanette was talking about it earlier, is just looking at the flexible options for responding to an assignment for students, and really teaching them how to take advantage of those options or how to use those options, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Yeah, I think they covered a lot of what I was thinking of. Yeah.
So in the chat again, Anjanette shared, review and edit all transcripts of videos for accuracy and accessibility. Yeah, really important. Thank you, Anjanette. Julia wrote, make sure captions are turned on when showing videos in class. Sarah Silverman wrote, I like the point to point out that immersive reading, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that existed in the LMS until recently. I know I can use it on Safari, but that was really good. So we have that in our LMS that can voice text, change contrast, change size, etc. And Tom really hits home on this particular one. The word optimize versus just give access. Teach learners how to find and use alternative paths and formats, either in formal learning spaces and time or through on-demand training. Vita wrote, all PowerPoints and articles need to go through accessibility checking. Yes. Tracy offered Zoom and in-person meetings. Shay, so smart. Build a bank of just-in-time tech resources to proactively support learners with those foundational skills with technology. And when Anjanette was offering her example, I just want to build on that. This student had no idea how to save a document, and it's their first college course that they're taking, and they had none of the requisite tech skills to be able to use the learning management system. So really important. So those just in time. So Stephanie Staffy, I'm thinking of you, and I can see you making us some just in time tech resources and sharing them. Other ideas that people have, and again, Stephanie says yes, she'll do it. Maybe we'll create my brain just went to like a Google site where we share them for everybody. If you use Blackboard, here's some just in time. Susan said, include attention accessibility features in writing assignments that will help students learn how to be people who create accessible texts.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's really good. Susan, can you say a little more about that if you're willing to unmute? Susan, can you? I don't know if you're able to do that.
Yes. Hi. Well, I mean, in my first year seminar, I have been just introducing students to the basics of the word style sheet, for example. This semester, I'm teaching first year students, and on their very first paper, on the day it was due, I was like, we're all going to learn how to use the ruler to format the bibliography. We're going to learn to use Zotero Bib to format your citation, and we're going to learn to use headings 1 and 2. So for your title and for your, 2 subheadings that were in there. So very simple. I was like, later we can learn how to change them if you don't like how they look, but we're just going to learn this. And it makes their work look good. And I explained to them, they all, and I explained it's a part about learning to create accessible documents. The thing about accessibility features is none of us knows any of us could, who aren't using them today, could have a need for them tomorrow. So it's just good practice. And so practicing little writing technologies, I think that's something, as a WAC director here, I'm trying to make a pitch that there are small steps anybody who's teaching anything can weave in to learning to use technology, so that it's not a big ask on the part of faculty, but it could have a big ripple effect for our writers.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And then, that whole idea of spacing and leaving white space, and even in the LMS, really important. And that's something that I see in the LMS and that we talked about recently, was how to make sure you're using the headings in your learning management system. Because again, if somebody needs that screen reader, or even for me personally, visually, again, being, where's my distractible friend? I get very distracted if the text isn't set up in a way that I can follow it. If it's big paragraphs, I'm done. So that, how we put the, white space and using the heading. So that's really, that's great, Sarah. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody else want to share or expand on their ideas? Sarah, you wrote, your PhD professor insisted you learn word style sheet. Yeah. And it's been worthwhile. Absolutely. Yeah. And, asking students to do the same, especially as they go out into the workforce. At least the students at Goodwin are all going, that's their next step. They're going into the workforce. Okay. And what was this? So, and Catherine wrote, that she works at a university. Yeah, we do some stuff with prisons as well. And newly paroled students have often been isolated from most of what basic tech. Yeah, the basic tech. So in other words, they've been incarcerated and now they don't really have an understanding of basic technology. So providing resources, teaching learning technology, how to sign into and navigate the LMS, how to edit documents, how to upload. We have a fairly new course that focuses on some of these items, including the Internet of Things, and how do you know where you're going and what you're getting yourself into, and safety around that. Again, I'm probably not saying your name correctly. Suna, ensure that students receive proper training and instruction on how to effectively use the tools and technologies if they are an integral part of the course or assessment process. This will enable them to engage confidently with the resources and technical difficulties and fully apply tools in achieving and learning objectives. Yeah, I don't know about anybody else's school, but I know at Goodwin, if I were to say this is a place where we could get way better, it would be this space. So thank you for sharing that. And other people are chiming in about being grateful that people help them learn technology or styles. And thank you. I pronounced your name properly. Thank you. And then Cindy wrote, many of our students came from the Google schools and our colleges used Microsoft. Oh yeah. Which freaked them out. And I'm laughing because I use that word all the time. So thank you. And they calm down when they see how similar they are. Yeah. And really, I'll bet a lot of students, Sue said a lot of students are continuing to use Google Docs for writings, and even on Microsoft Campus, sure. And then they download it into Word, and that is true. And being being honoring their methods, right? So if they want to use a Google Doc, that's fine. And so it gets back to the first consideration, vary and honor methods, right? So if it's a Google Doc, we can work with that. And not getting all caught up in it. And then David said, when I share the instructional materials I have created, I take the time to explain why and how I design them for accessibility. That's really important. So thank you for that. And I've never thought of doing that. That's a wonderful suggestion, David. And then are there any more? No, I think did I miss anybody? Does anybody want to shout out, speak out? Thanks, Susan, for sharing. Thank you, Aunt Jeanette, for sharing. Other ideas or thoughts on this? Really, really important. This particular guideline, and Catherine says she knows nothing about style sheets. To sense a theme today, it seems to be explicit about your methods, approaches, and ways of engaging. Yes, this notion of, yeah, and that gets into the tilt model of being intentional and making sure we're clear with students. Why are we doing this? Really using our voice to explain to students why this. Why does it matter? So thanks for noticing that, Tom. All right, other comments?
And just Diana, real quick, I think we did this, how you brought in the online studies folks and really talked about web content accessibility standards and used that as a way to do some faculty professional development. And I thought that was really, really helpful. So that's, institutionally speaking, that's a great way to bring IT or online studies in with faculty and show how to use headings, how to make your documents, accessible to readers, things like that.
Yeah, we did that in a faculty meeting in Zoom,
Yep.
so it's really manageable. And I know there are some faculty here today who participated in that. And people learned things that they were unaware of. So you can't do what you don't know, right? Somebody has to help you figure it out. All right, Rob, are you ready to move on?
Yeah, we are for the big slide, which I think we can get more people to share out with this one.
Yeah, there's one comment here so there's actually two comments I don't want to miss.
Yep.
Where I lost one now. So Sue said, on our campus, we don't have a campus license for Adobe Pro, which limits the ease with which staff and faculty can create accessible PDFs. It's a real barrier to change. And when we had, and I'm going to look to you, Rob, if you know the answer to this, when we had that accessibility workshop, we did it over, what was it, 4 sessions. He did tag, he being Parker tagged the PDF, but was he using Adobe Pro? Do you know? Because we don't all have access to that either.
Yeah, I don't, Anjana, I think he was, but
yeah, so we don't, we are in the same situation.
Yeah, we are.
We don't have a campus license that I'm aware of for Adobe Pro. And that is a barrier. And how do you work around it? And Carrie says she thinks there's a handful of licenses at our university. Yeah, because we don't have an enterprise license for Google products, we can't use that. Yeah, so some of this, even, how we use Zoom, for example, or I'm a big fan of Padlet. I love Padlet, the ease with which I can use it. I know it's not as accessible as it might be, but yet there are people on campus who would love to use it more, but we don't have, we have that same thing. It's not the license issue and the monies to do it. Yeah. Okay. You ready to, Rob? I think we're good.
Yeah, we are. I think we're still on time and maybe.
Okay, so Chris just wrote, he can do a lot freely with Adobe Online with a sign-in account at no cost with PDFs. So Chris, can you tag PDFs then on the online version? Do you know?
I'm not sure, but I know some of those things that typically I can't do with the downloaded version unless I pay for it, like merging multiple documents. I can do that, but I haven't tried it with things like the text recognition and so forth. So I'm not sure how far it goes with the accessibility features and tagging and stuff. Has anyone else tried it with the Adobe Online PDF?
Yeah, I know with merging documents, Safari, you can do that really easy. Not Safari, with Preview. I use a Mac, and it's so easy to put PDFs together, or to have, to just add a page where you want, on a Mac. It's super easy. And you can also annotate pretty easily. I don't know about tagging. I've never tried it. So, for if there's any Mac users. I actually prefer the preview to Adobe. Okay, I think we're ready. Yes. All right, next.
Next, so here's the big one, and I know Tom and others have been sort of already talked about this and previewed this. And really, when we're offering choices for our students, I think, we like to believe, or maybe our assumption is that people, our learners, can make choices, and then, the choice making for many isn't always easy. And I think there's kind of three areas to look at that can be challenging. I think we can have choice overload. I think a few of you mentioned that already. With some of our learners, it can be cultural differences in how they view themselves in relation to others, and interdependence, and kind of just going with what someone may provide them. And then I think the third area is trying to balance this idea of autonomy with personal control over outcomes. And again, I think someone said this, too much choice can be quite overwhelming, can be confusing, or can be too much responsibility for our learners. So I think those are all kind of the context for understanding how choices, or just putting out choices, can really be too much for our learners. So how do we, using transparency and being explicit in our teaching, how can we really teach our students or support our students to make those choices?
Yeah, and this is for within the UDL institutes. This comes up again and again, and we've now conducted, I think it's 2 are in progress, so 13 are completed, and so it's like something like 180 faculty. We've trained about UDL through Goodwin, and this idea of choice comes up again and again. And the issue is, what I hear faculty say, let me say it this way, who are in the institutes, is, well, students will revert to the text. Well, students don't want to make the choice. And the literatures on choice making, particularly in where you go to, buying, marketing, that kind of stuff, there is this idea of choice overload. And so you want to give fewer choices. And this, again, I can't emphasize it. If you're going to ask students to make a choice, there needs to be, and I think, Tom, you alluded to this earlier, explain why there are these choices and how they might go about selecting the choices. So this is, if I could say, choice actually becomes a barrier, in terms of my teaching, and also in terms of what I've seen through the multiple institutes. Yeah, thank you, Tom. The Decision Lab, choice architecture. Yeah, it's a huge field of study, really. So it's worthwhile looking at that and thinking about how we do this, what we do, and really teaching the students how to make choice.
And sometimes it's a great way to challenge our students too, to try out different ways of expressing their learning, and kind of showing them, kind of moving out of their comfort zone, and using a different modality, which can sometimes be helpful in the workforce, and also they can realize, oh, this is a different way, a sort of easier way for me to show my learning, or to, address whatever the learning goal is. So I find that, especially with our graduate students, it's having these conversations, like you just said, Diana, and really exploring with them and showing them how to show what they're doing in different ways. Yeah.
Okay, so Anjanette wrote, once they realize they can do something different, they often try something new that works better, right? And then Sarah is offering the Padlet link again, where all the other UDL YouTube links are and slides.
Yep.
All right, are we ready?
We're ready. That brings us to our final stop, reflect, and share. Kind of wrap it up here and think again, once again, individually. You can share out in whatever way is comfortable for you through chat or unmuting. And what are you doing now to design materials and physical environments that ensure access and participation for every learner? So really kind of putting together everything we've been talking about throughout this presentation today. What might you also do more of, and what will you do after today? So thinking of what you heard from your colleagues and what we presented here, reflecting on what you're doing now to design those materials and physical environments to ensure access and interaction with every learner, and then what might you do more of going forward?
And this is the take it home, take it home. Write one thing down in the chat that you think you can do that you maybe didn't try. I think I'm going to go back and try to use Preview to tag PowerPoints. I mean, not PowerPoints, PDFs, sorry. So unmute and share away. We want to hear what you have to say because this has been such a wonderful few weeks. Tagging PDFs. Yes. I think we need a tagging group or, tag, wait a minute. Is that when you spray paint? No, that's graffiti. Okay. Yeah, tagging PDFs. How do we do that? If anybody has any good suggestions or places that will help us to do it, we'd love to see that in the chat. Thanks. I thought it had something to do with graffiti. Thank you, Chris. I love graffiti. Ellen's going to work on an assignment so that students can create a graphic organizer. Tom, thank you, Tom. Creating A11 PDFs. And what? So thank you. Accessible. Okay. And
Tracy.
And Anjanette's going to give the pros and cons of the choices available. Right. Oh, that's so funny. Okay, yeah. And I'm laughing at Tracy's. This is so good. Stephanie's going to look. Hang on, this is jumping around. Yeah, so A11 equals accessible. I have never seen that. Is that like tagging? So that's a tag. Okay. She's going to look for AI tools. Will now tag PDFs and run accessibility checks. Stephanie, if you know of specific ones, Equal Web, can you put the link in the chat, Stephanie? Shay's going to dig into. Oh my God, Tom. Shay's going to dig into, I'm going to dig more into circle pedagogy, and forever on YouTube, there's going to be me saying, oh my God, Tom. A11Y accessibility. Okay. Thank you, Tom, for that abbreviation.
Yeah, the 11 stands for the 11 letters missing in the word accessibility between the A and the
Perfect.
Y.
Oh my gosh. If you knew me, Tom, that would go over my head for the rest of my life unless you explained it to me. That is
like being transparent there with the jargon. Yeah.
And then Stephanie put the Equal Web. And Sarah wrote in the old UDL guidelines, this would be clarifying jargon. Thank you. Susan's going to continue to learn about accessibility in PowerPoint. That PowerPoint is wonderful. You can really do a lot. It gives you really good feedback on the colors of the font and all of that. Same thing with Word. Microsoft Office has that available as well. I don't know about Excel. I'm not a big Excel user. I use it for what I need it for. I don't usually use it to do anything beyond immediate tasks that don't go beyond my desk. Right. And Tom wants to dive into non-dominant culture approaches to ways of knowing and communicating. That's great, Tom. Thank you for that. Other ideas that we have. This is really great. I'm going to look at that equal web. Perfect. Okay. Other thoughts?
Is there a way to save a lot of these? We're going to save the chat, but save a lot of these resources.
People can they can download the chat.
They can download the chat for these.
Yeah,
links.
this should be set up for, click on the 3 dots at the bottom of the chat. Thank you, Anjanette, for the technology. So it's, and I think
Perfect.
they are, it'll be at the top, I think, Anjanette.
Yeah.
And save the chat. And everyone has, so on my Zoom screen, it's right at the top, where it says the name of the webinar. And if you click the 3 dots, it should say save the chat. So everyone can save the chat for themselves, and have the links and the information. Okay, we are almost at time. Also, Sarah says, if you have the chat window open there, right, Sarah, the 3 upper at the tops. Okay. David's going to do a better job of connecting assignment options to students' career paths.
Good.
Yeah. And, David, that brings to mind also in terms of this particular guideline and the considerations is, and then the method of responding that's appropriate for the career path as well. Perhaps writing an email explaining something in particular might be more appropriate, or creating a PowerPoint or whatever, but really looking at what are the modes of and tools that are used in a particular career. So that's a great idea, and appreciate your contribution. All right. Next, should we go to the next slide, Rob?
Yeah, go ahead. Yep. I think it's just the comments and questions and then the quote.
No, it's not the comments.
No, that's right. Come play with us. That's what this is. Do you want to go over that, Diana?
Sure, I'd love to. So is when Rob and I were meeting about this session, this webinar, I just looked at him and I said, do we want to go for a second series, especially because of the the 3.0. So if somebody is interested in presenting, the way we will do a little call for presenters, we'll do it's going to be the same format, probably the same time of day and the same day of the week, because apparently if you research this time and day of the week is the most popular, and you get the best attendance. So if you're interested, you can see Rob's email there. And Rob, if you want to type it in the chat, and I'll read it out loud for people. It's rlegary@goodwin.edu. rlegary@goodwin.edu. If you're interested, send Rob an email. We will do the 9 and 9 again, so focusing on a particular guideline. And then within that guideline, you may choose to, and we'll probably ask people to do this, to focus in on 1 or 2 considerations, because with the expanded guideline and considerations, it's a lot. Oh, you're welcome, Chris. We've had a lot of fun doing this. Thank you so much, Tom. So we'll stay on if people want to chat. We'll stay on for a few minutes, but we really appreciate everybody's contributions today. We hope you found it helpful. It was great for us to explore more closely the new guidelines, and that's why we chose to just put it out there and make sure people are really starting to dive in. So again, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your week, and stay healthy. Oh, you're welcome, Sylvia. Glad that we figured we'd have newbies. So thank you, Sylvia, for pointing out that was helpful. And to everyone else, have a good rest of your week.